Hello you! Welcome back to Boxes and Bubbles, where today we're looking at New Masters #1, published by Image Comics. Written by Shobo Coker and art by Shof Coker. Shobo Coker is a creator I hadn't heard of until quite recently, when his series Buckhead began publication over at Boom Studios. I was quite taken with it. I actually wrote a review of it, which hasn't been published yet, but more on that another time. As you may have noticed, unlike Shobo and his brother, Shof, I don't happen to be Nigerian myself, but what I particularly liked about Buckhead was the way it authentically portrayed its African characters. Toba is bothered by the way Americans mispronounce his name, and his accent means that instead of the American mom, he calls his mother mum, and she uses some Nigerian flourishes in her speech too, like "It's windy, Sha." The Nigerian roots of the story shone through, though it was a story that could be told about characters from anywhere. It was so refreshing to me to see not just a young black protagonist as a character, but some Nigerian representation in a comic book. Not only that, but those elements were weaved gently into the fabric of the story, inextricable but subtle, not being leaned on too heavily, but undeniably there, at least until issue 3, in which the subtle groundwork is built upon to bring the Nigerian influences very much to the front and centre. Buckhead knows its audience most likely has no awareness of the subject matter, and introduces a whole pantheon through its story, in a way that's really accessible, and furthermore super interesting. It all ties back neatly to the central story so cleverly, and the result is a modern story with a very traditional African backbone. It's so meticulously built to have both these elements balanced perfectly. And that's what Shobo manages to do here, with the second currently running monthly book with his name on it, New Masters. Only this time, instead of a balancing act, he's riding a unicycle, on a tightrope, while he's juggling at the same time. There is so much going on in New Masters, especially for one issue, extra especially for a debut issue. But somehow, Shobo has managed to make everything super clear and easy to read. We're introduced to so many characters and there's so much world and universe building, but the pacing is great. Nothing ever drags on too long or feels rushed. And as you read on, you begin to realize the connections between everything we're seeing. At its core, New Masters Issue 1 is the story of a supply chain. A chain in which we get to see every link, and the people involved in and affected by it. It begins with this cool young lady, Ola, who has a metal arm and drives a motorcycle. She's attempting to extract a small amount of a chemical called obsidian. This is our first introduction to the substance that's the crux of the plot, at least for now. As you'll see, the scale of this story grows and grows. Ola manages to get what she's after, and she drives back to her hometown, past these beautiful landscapes and these unusual looking creatures. I don't know what medium Shof uses, but on the skies and trees especially in these panels, there's a texture I can't place. Maybe it's digitally painted? She drives through the day and into the night, where we get this awesome panel with light trails from her bike's tail lights. I can't ever see this in artwork without thinking it must be a reference to Akira, and in this case she is driving a motorcycle. I guess it isn't necessarily always a homage, but either way, I always get a kick out of seeing this in artwork. In town, she tries to sell the obsidian, and again, Shobo makes the African roots of the book shine through. The characters speak mainly in English, but it's sprinkled with bits and pieces of what I think is Yoruba. When I searched some words in the earlier pages, I didn't get any helpful results, but others later on turned up Yoruba to English pages. It's super cool to see that in a comic, and the words are cleverly placed, so that most of the time we can guess at the meaning, or gather it from context. It's such a cool way to stay authentic, and immerse us as readers into this world. Ola gets swindled at the market and she heads home, which is when we transition to a group of people talking about the illegal trade of obsidian. They're in a meeting with Governor Ojuma, who leaves the deliberations early, saying that she'll defer to their expertise and that they'll invariably do what they always do and figure out a way to fatten their wallets. This interlude is actually pretty short, but it gives us a whole bunch of information. It's clear that those at the top of this chain are driven by profit, and this new governor has no time for it. Whether that means she'll plan to do something to change the situation, or if she's ambivalent to it and content to let it continue this way isn't clear yet. As I mentioned before, this is the story of a supply chain, and we see those at the top talk about the people further down who need to steal obsidian. Actually, we're about to learn that they're pretty much the bottom link in the chain. There are people in Makoko who risk their lives, or an early death, in order to dive far enough down to steal milliliters of obsidian from the pipelines running from the mines through the ocean. The government wants these people gone, and so restricts their supplies of water and power. They're about to be given a glimmer of hope though, because these two have come up with a device that can extract small amounts of obsidian for them, much more safely, though they're asking a hefty price for it. Back with Governor Ojuma, we learned some things that even she didn't know about the supplies of obsidian. Within a decade, the reserves will be completely used up. Knowing that, her father is still willingly selling off obsidian to the stockpiling Jovians, who seem to be another species, perhaps from another planet, who were also struggling for resources. What I found so brilliant about this was that after first learning about this entire obsidian industry, its politics, the lives and livelihoods it affects, the struggle for some to obtain obsidian, and the vice grip the mining companies are trying to maintain, we zoom out and suddenly see the whole thing as just a part of an even greater universe. This is true of real life too. The more you zoom into something, even something super mundane, for example the sticky price labels on products in convenience stores, the more you'll find is involved with the production and distribution of those things. Zoom out further, and those labels are just one element of an entire product. And those products are just one element of an entire store. And that store is just one element of an entire chain of stores. And on it goes. Governor Ojuma learns about one other thing too. This thing could save Earth from collapse once its main resource is used up. It's an artifact left over from a previous civilization, one that was much more advanced than those currently remaining. It was previously owned by someone who was painstakingly decoding the ancient information and selling it piecemeal to various species. Now that the energy crisis is looming, it's become too dangerous for him to hold on to, so now he's decided to sell it. Of course, being the key to survival means that it's in pretty high demand, and it's not only humanity that are eager to get their hands on it. And that's where issue 1 ends. New Masters number 1 did an insane amount of world building, and kept it interesting by connecting each vignette with characters and how circumstances affected them. This is a lot of information and exposition, masterfully delivered in a way that doesn't feel like exposition. And then, in its final pages, everything we learned exploded outwards like popcorn. And that already huge scope got dwarfed by the scope of this entire populated universe. There's so much going on here, but the threads of story are so manageable and so clearly connected to each other. The Coker brothers mentioned that this book took nearly a decade for them to plan, and you can feel their meticulousness just from reading the book. It's like a Swiss watch. There are so many directions this book could go in, and I really hope the run is long enough to allow it enough issues to explore all of that potential. So, as you might have been able to tell from my review, I really enjoyed this comic, and I can't wait to see where it takes us next. But that's all for this time. If you enjoyed this review and fancy hearing about some other comics that came out recently, have a look around the rest of the channel for some more reviews. And head over to Twitter and follow me at Boxes and Bubbles to hear about the dozens of comic books I read every week but don't have time to make videos about. While I've got you here, I'd like to ask a small favour. If you've watched any of my other videos, you probably heard this already, so feel free to skip it. But if you haven't, I'm trying to get up to 100 subs. Only because if you get 100 subscribers on YouTube, you get your own custom URL, instead of my URL being youtube.com/whatever mess it is now. And also, if you have under 50 subscribers, your videos might not show up in searches, which means nobody can find this on their own. So I have to go out and bombard places with links, which feels kind of gross. Last time I checked, I'm at 48 subscribers, so I'm almost at 50, which I hope will help people to find the channel on their own. 48 might not sound like such a big number, but I'm so pleased about it. So if you've enjoyed any of my videos in the past, make sure to share them to your friends, give me a thumbs up, and a sub if you fancy. Thank you so much.